Welcome friends to another r/malicious compliance video. If you want to be my knight in shining armor, all you have to do is hit the like and subscribe buttons down below. That said, our first story of the day is by Flashy Cow 1, entitled Customer Wants to Show His Son the Freezer He Incorrectly Installed. Gets sued by the owner due to malicious compliance. So this happened a few years ago, so it's not exact. I was listening to a story on YouTube that reminded me of this customer. I worked at a burger joint back then. I was working through college at the time. This restaurant was brand new and the building was only finished being built 6 months ago. From day one, there were electrical problems with the walk-in freezer. This one is the size of most living rooms. Once, we even had to throw out all the meat and close for a week for repairs and to replace the stock. Kinda bad for a burger joint to only serve salad, you know. Most of the time I was the barkeep, but sometimes the waiters needed help. This was a day I was helping them as the bar was slow. I see a customer in his 40s, whom I'll call Ken from here on out, and his son who was maybe 10 years old. I take their orders and at first everything's normal. I go get their drinks and put their order in. I come back and he asks me if he could go back in with his son because he wanted to show off the custom freezer that he installed with his company. He even bragged about needing a crane to lift it into the place. I told Ken no. It was not only a health code violation, but also a huge safety issue. He got absolutely angry. He argued that he knew that kitchen better than anyone there. He himself wired the freezer and his company installed it. The son was looking embarrassed. He even asked his dad to stop and that he didn't need to see it. Ken berated the kid, asking if he was proud of his dad and the restaurant equipment/electric company he owned. I told him I would go ask a manager just to make him happy. I wasn't going to ask, I knew the answer. I went to the back for about 2 minutes and ran a load of dishes for the dish guy while I waited on Ken and son's food. The food came out and I took it to them and told Ken the manager said no. Most people would be okay with that. He demanded to speak to the manager himself. Cue malicious compliance. Little did Ken know that I had overheard my manager, who was also the owner, saying he was going to sue the company that installed the freezer. But he was having trouble finding out who the owner was, so he could have the lawyer address the letter to him. My boss had lost thousands of dollars because of the freezer being incorrectly installed. It passed the building and initial health inspections because the wiring issue wasn't visible, and it held temperature on inspection day. Oh, was boss happy when I told him the owner of that freezer installation company was right outside eating a burger. He and I walked out and I introduced Ken as the owner of the company that installed the freezer. Manager put on a big customer service smile, the kind that secretly says screw you. He says he's so happy with the new restaurant, but he needed the owner's card in case there was an issue with the brand new freezer. Ken happily gives manager his personal card with his personal cell and email. Boss smiles with a real one this time and says thank you. Now, my lawyer will be in contact with you soon for the incorrectly installed freezer. Ken just had a mouth hanging open. Before he can say anything, manager tells him he had 2 new electricians look at it because no one at his office would help him. So he knows it was the freezer and he knows it was his shoddy job that caused him thousands in monetary loss. He also adds that if he attempts to leave without paying, he'll be arrested because now the manager has his name and phone number. Manager/owner did sue and won close to $50,000 in damages. In a weird way, I almost feel sad for the guy because he was like, oh, I installed this awesome custom freezer. I want to show it to my kid. But then you see all the entitlement from them and you quickly are like, you know, I actually don't feel that bad. Plus the fact that whether they were trying or not, we wouldn't really know. Either way, they did a terrible job wiring it. Do you feel the least bit bad for this guy? Let me know in the comments down below. Our next story is by T-Toxy. The office is for staff only. This one's going back a few years to 2014. I was working on a construction job as a pipe welder, building an LNG plant for a company that's currently building nuclear reactors for the US Navy. And the way this company had itself set up was with 2 distinct classes of employee. The craft employees are the ones that actually do the work. Everyone from a laborer to a machine operator, pipe fitters, welders, and as well will become important later, the leading hands are all in this category. Staff are the salaried employees. Supervisors, engineers, welding inspectors, section superintendents, etc. Our crew worked great for a few months, until our supervisor got a better offer elsewhere one day and quit, leaving our leading hand to try and manage the crew of 80 on his own. Getting another supervisor anytime soon wasn't going to happen, and we all got on really well, so we just did what we could to keep things going. One of the jobs the supervisor would normally do is pull up all of the drawings we needed. The drawings tell us the exact shape, specification, and location of each pipe that has to go, and with a crew as big as ours, we might need 50 to 100 drawings each day. The thing is, the supervisor had access to the company intranet system with a company laptop and a printer. Us lowly craft employees didn't have that. What we did have is access to the literal library of physical drawing folders in the main office. And me, who had spent years in old power stations going through old physical drawings, and knew how to manually search through millions of pages to get the exact drawings we needed. So that became my job. For the first week or so without a supervisor, my leading hand would give me a list of drawings to pick out and photocopy, and I'd get that done. It would take me 2 to 3 hours of a morning, and then I'd get onto my usual duties welding stuff, until the section piping manager saw me in his office one day. They say, "Who are you?" I say, I'm OP. They say, "You're not staff, you're one of our welders. The office is for staff only, go back to your section." I say, "You got it, boss." So I did, and on my way there, I told my leading hand that the office was for staff only as well. You see, my leading hand was very quick, and he caught on immediately. So he called up the piping section manager and confirmed that the office was off limits to the craft employees, which included my leading hand. We both knew we were at least 5 weeks out from getting a new supervisor, so neither of us went into the office to get drawings. Our entire crew of 80 people, all of which were making $3,500 plus per week before tax, did zero productive work for the next 7 weeks. Because the office is for staff only. I get that rules are rules, but in dire circumstances when you're understaffed, you probably want to start overlooking a few rules just so you can get by. And I'm not saying overlooking safety regulations or anything like that, but if the workers need access to files to do their job, and they no longer have the person who normally did that, you would have to figure something out. I guess they didn't mind paying for no work. Our next story is by Bolivar Shagnasty. Subway time theft malicious compliance costs franchise owners much more than our less than $7 an hour minimum wage. About 15 years ago, I was in high school and started working at a new Subway in my town. This was right when the decor changed from a New York subway map to the vegetables and stuff all over the walls. The owners were very adamant that we only got paid for our schedule and not for the actual time we worked. I didn't think much of it because I never really had a job before. It was after my first few shifts that I realized this was BS. I'd get paid for working 5 to 8, but I'd have to stay until almost 9 because the dinner rush was rough and prep needed to get done. After a few pay periods, we high school employees raised the question with the owners and told them our time slips didn't match our paychecks. They said we knew that we only got paid for our schedule and not total hours worked. At the time, a buddy was dating a girl whose mom worked for the State Department of Labor. He brought up the issue with his girlfriend's mom and got an investigation started. The problem with the state labor department is that investigations were announced ahead of time. They were notified that the state was interested in pay discrepancies and were going to review payroll and compare it to the time clock records. But those gears ground slowly. Before the hammer fell, we had a new policy quickly implemented that said we were only allowed to work the hours we were scheduled and not a minute more. Cool, glad that's in writing. Things went okay for a few weeks, with only occasional managerial grumblings about having to do more work now that we left at our time on the dot. Then our city hosted a travel baseball tournament at a park about a mile from our store. You can probably see where this is going. We get busloads of people in our little shopping complex and a line out the door when my shift ends at 1. Deuces, guys. The manager/owner's son is in his office watching The Matrix when I go and clock out. He gets all pissy about the line and says I have to stay and help. I asked if I'd get paid for the extra time. He said, "You only get paid for your scheduled time," and trailed off. He knew he was screwed. He didn't have the ability to authorize more payroll expenses without also calling his management into question. Sorry. As I'm walking out the front, we weren't allowed to park in the back near the door. We had to park in Gen Pop parking and walk out the front door. He starts following me out and shouting, in front of customers. He fired me on the spot and demanded I give back my Subway shirts. I say, no, you took $15 per shirt out of my first paycheck. They're mine. I found out later that afternoon that 2 other people quit after their shifts ended because the job was poop, the pay was poop, and the mother truckery was boundless. The absentee owners eventually called each of us and asked us to come back. One of us did. I didn't. My other friend didn't either. I actually got a job at a different Subway that was a piece of cake compared to the job I got fired from. All of the employees eventually got their back pay after the Labor Department investigation dust settled. They settled with the state to pay everyone 300% of their missing wages and had to pay for annual audits for 5 years to ensure they weren't breaking the law again. It got so bad that Subway's parent company, Doctors Associates, sent a team down to junk slap the owners into compliance with state and federal labor laws. All this because they didn't want to pay us our minimum wage for the extra half hour or so per day. It seems they were pretty used to scooping up unaware teenagers working their first jobs and just trying to take advantage of them however they could. Honestly, for a place like that, I imagine the turnover rate is pretty high regardless. Maybe that place will actually have a little bit more success now that they have to pay people for all the time they work, even though it's minimum wage. At least there's some kind of motivation to actually want to stay. This next story is by Griselda Loves Cats. Clearly, this is the perfect time to get to know the new neighbors. About 2 years after my family moved to a smallish university town in a southwestern state of the US, the acreage around our house was sold to developers. The building noise was awful a lot of the time, but we met some great people. The workmen on the various phases, not the real estate developers. Once the first part of the development was finished enough to have neighbors living in them, the house sort of next to / behind our house sold. The new owners were veterinarians. He taught at the university, and she had just opened up a practice near our house. They had dogs, who apparently were not allowed into the house after dark. One of the poor dogs was an elderly spaniel who was blind and she would get lost out in the yard. My parents' bedroom is closest to these neighbors' house. The city has an ordinance about barking dogs, letting your dogs bark all night, etc. And these neighbors also had a brand new homeowners association that specifically had fines starting at how many times the dog barked in an hour. Who was assigned to count the barks, I never did find out, but these vets let their dogs bark for hours. We asked them nicely to make it stop. Other neighbors would go and ask them to make the dog stop barking, but they just wouldn't. The HOA got onto them, didn't seem to change anything. Even having the cops stop by and give them a ticket for letting the dogs bark for hours every night didn't stop them. Mrs. Veterinarian told a cop and some neighbors gathered around that her dogs were angels and weren't the ones barking. She would be kept up all night if her dogs were out in the yard barking all night. Clearly it must be someone else's dogs and her poor babies were being picked on. So a few nights later, my mom asked me to make a big batch of muffins. She set up the coffee maker and made up a tray that had everything needed to go to have coffee and muffins with the new neighbors. That night when the dog started barking, Mom got up to work on some grating. About 2 a.m., Mom started the coffee and poured it into a thermal carafe. She made sure to make the tray look very pretty. Then she carried that tray all the way around to the veterinarian neighbor's house. She knocked on their door and rang the bell until they answered. Then, just as sweet as pie, she said it seemed like the perfect time to really get to know them, since clearly no one in either their house or ours could sleep through their dogs barking all night. After that, their dogs didn't bother us at night. They made sure of it. In the long run, they turned into very nice neighbors, thankfully. Bottom line, personally, I love dogs. I'm willing to overlook a lot of stuff for dogs. But barking all night and keeping somebody up just will never fly. And our final story of the day is by IBS Means No Pizza. You reap what you sow, brother-in-law. My brother-in-law and sister are born-again Christians of 10 years and a sect that does not condone alcohol or gambling. I have no problem with this ethos, but my brother-in-law loves to shove his religious views down our throats at every family event, and it's draining. My parents were brought up in the same religion, but are very laid back about the rules and believe what they do is their choice alone. Everybody else can do their own thing. I'm agnostic. I play the national lottery, £2 a week, and I like to have a glass of wine with meals out. My brother-in-law comments on this every time we meet. He comments, "It's a sin." I say, "Only for you, not for me." This year, I won a few thousand on the lottery. I decided to give away some money to my parents and in-laws so they can go on a lovely holiday next year with the grandkids. Here's the malicious compliance. Brother-in-law found out about the money and got sister to call me asking for their share. I say brother-in-law has made it very clear that gambling is a sin, and any money received is tainted by that sin. I wouldn't want him to compromise his faith by accepting sinful money. My sister laughed and said she would relay the message to brother-in-law. Brother-in-law is now not speaking to me. Oh dear, what a shame. Nobody likes a hypocrite. You're going to nag somebody every time you see them take a drink or do some kind of recreational gambling. But as soon as they hit pay dirt, no, forget about that sin stuff. Give me some of that money. I care about my religion, but not that much. Let me cash out, OP. While they're busy not talking to OP, I hope they keep on simmering to themselves thinking about how OP isn't wrong. But with that being said, that's all the time we have for today. So of all these stories I've read today, which is your favorite and why? Let me know in the comments down below. And if you haven't yet, if you could like and subscribe, that would mean a lot to me. Whatever you do, whether it's liking, subscribing, turning notifications on, all of it helps grow this channel and I appreciate the heck out of it. So until next time, I'll see you all tomorrow with some more stories.